Thank you, Herb. I appreciate that. Good morning, everyone. It is a new month, which means it is a new theme for us to unpackage together. We've been doing that this year. It's something a little different, I know, for some of us, but we've taken one theme and kind of centered our focus around that for the entire month. And so last month, we spent the month looking at change. This month, we're going to honor Mental Health Awareness Month, which is the month of May, and we're going to spend this month talking about mental illness and mental health. And here's why I want to do this. Because I think it's really critical that we acknowledge the fact that this is a topic we do not talk about enough in faith spaces. And I am a firm believer that this topic, this conversation around mental health, it needs to be normalized, it needs to be understood, and it needs to be seen as holy and beautiful and sacred. And oftentimes, many times, there's been a history in the church where religion has not known how to address mental health. And it's been done in ways that can be really harmful and really hurtful. So today we're going to kind of start with a big overview and a conversation around our feelings and kind of dispelling some myths and why does this matter in the framework of theology and our beliefs as followers of Jesus. Next week, we're going to lean into religious trauma and the impact that it has on people's mental health. In week 3, we're going to look at complicated emotions, some of those that really kind of get a bad reputation, especially in faith spaces. And how can we break down some of the stereotypes around those complicated emotions? In week 4, which also happens to be Pentecost, we're going to be talking about the importance of community and connection when it comes to our mental health. And then week 5, possibly, Doyle may be sharing. Doyle may have a scheduling change, and so that may or may not happen. We'll kind of see what happens, but possibly sharing from his experience. So one of the things that I want to begin with as we start this conversation for this month is this. I think it's really important for us to understand that humanity was never created to be a monolith. We are not cookie cutter, correct? We are each unique and different. We are each special and unique in our own ways. We see the world differently. We interact with the world differently. Our brains process differently. Our hearts feel things at different depths. And there's something incredibly beautiful about that. One of the things that we oftentimes, I think, especially in faith spaces, don't talk about is the fact that those emotions deserve to be unique and individual and personalized, that we don't all react to certain situations and events and different triggers exactly the same way. Right now, I'm currently teaching our spring session of the Enneagram class, and several of you are in there with me. Some of you have taken this class in the fall when we took it last year. So if you're in the class, you've taken the class, or here's a little quick lesson for you. One of the things we talk about in the Enneagram is how we are all part of one, analyze and process and think deeply about something. And they want to see evidence and they want to kind of be able to understand that from a very logical sense first. Then we've got the heart triad, who reacts to things with really strong emotions. And those can be at different levels. And a lot of times those emotions are where they connect with people. And then the third set of 3 types is in what we call the gut triad or the instinct triad. The people who, a lot of times that is anger and frustration that comes out first. And kind of those things when we see a headline or we see injustice or we see someone being harmed, we react in this really strong instinctual way. All of that and that conversation that we have over those 10 weeks in this class is really designed to help us understand this truth, that we're not all the same. We're not all cookie cutter. So understanding how we are wired and understanding how other people in our lives are wired helps us to have better relationships. It helps us to have better conflict that is healthier, that we can figure out how to work through. It helps us to be able to do life together better and more affirming of one another, but it also helps us to understand and appreciate the different challenges that we may face, especially when it comes to mental health. So I grew up in a context, I've shared this with you many, many times before, I grew up in the Southern Baptist Church. And so I would consider that to be very evangelical and also very fundamental. I cannot tell you, I've really racked my brain in this for years. I cannot tell you that I ever heard a sermon, a Sunday school lesson, a youth lesson, or a conversation that dealt with my emotions. Not one. I certainly did not hear one that revolved around mental health and how we address mental health in and out of the church. And so I grew up with some language around me, which we'll talk more about next week, that really oftentimes made me feel very much like my feelings were something I needed to compartmentalize. That I was welcome at church, but my feelings were not. That I needed to focus on some of the happier emotions, because the sad emotions, the complicated emotions that we're going to spend some time talking about, that maybe those weren't quite as holy. So I have walked through some really problematic language and beliefs around feelings and around mental health. Many, many, many years ago, I was going through a situation. Bob and I and our family was navigating a situation that I literally was wrecked. My emotions were a mess. I felt so much guilt and shame that I couldn't get on top of my emotions because of the way that I had been raised. And it was through that season that I started jotting down lots of thoughts and lots of ideas and things that I was processing and questions that I had in prayer with God. And ultimately, those thoughts and those feelings and those lessons and aha moments became this book that I released in 2021 called God of the Gaps. And in that book, I share a whole chapter about my journey to understand that feelings were not bad, that feelings were not wrong, that feelings were not sinful, but that feelings were a gift. They were something that we were divinely designed to have and to feel. We were wired with them with intention and care and compassion so that we could better not only navigate life, but appreciate the nuance of life. It was in that season of life for me and through a really fantastic therapist that I got introduced to the emotions wheel. And this idea that our emotions are deep and wide, and there's a lot of language that I didn't necessarily have for my emotions at the time. And I'm going to show you that here in just a second. But one of the things that I recognized was that every single one of these emotions was kind of like a magnet that had been embedded into my soul and into my mind and into my heart. And it was wired there so that I could connect with other people who had similar emotional experiences. Our circumstances were seldom ever exactly the same, but we had similar emotional connections. I could connect with other people who were feeling overwhelming grief, or who were going through a lot of doubt, or who were asking a lot of questions, or who had a lot of frustration with broken systems and with the way that they were treated in certain environments. And that became something that was so beautifully important to me. But it also helped me to understand that those magnets in my soul, those feelings that I had, also helped me to connect better with the divine. That when I felt one of those, I didn't have to try to hide. Scripture tells us that God already knows our heart, right? God knows what we're thinking and what we're feeling before we even say it. That was the season of my life where Romans 8:28, man, when it talks about how the Holy Spirit can interpret even our groans as prayers, I did a lot of groaning that I didn't have language for in that season of my life. So a few weeks ago, our religious trauma support group that meets here on the first and third Wednesday nights of the month went through an exercise where we looked at this emotions wheel. And one of the things that we talked about, I know it's really tiny and you can't read all of this. I will put a link to this image in your Sunday follow-up email today so that you can kind of see this and use this in your own life. But the thing that we talked about was how a lot of times, especially if we've grown up in a high control, high fundamental, conservative religious space, we may have really only kind of focused our attention on the center of this wheel. We may have only really been able to articulate anger or happiness or surprise or fear. And again, some of those were coded as good or bad or holy or sinful, and we're going to unpackage all of that. That's why we're doing this for a whole month. But what became really important to me on my journey was that when I started to realize that, okay, yeah, I feel sad, but as I started to kind of work my way outside of this wheel, I gained language that not only empowered me, but it helped me to understand myself. Like, I'm not just sad, I'm actually feeling really lonely. And then I go from lonely to feeling like, I feel like my circumstances make me really isolated. And I don't know that anybody else has ever been through what I'm going through, and nobody else could possibly understand what I'm experiencing. And that language gave me some power and some ability to express myself and what I was going through. A lot of times, these kind of skills are things that we should be teaching kids about, right? And our kids ministry program is an ideal place to do that. In fact, today, our Kids Connection kids are reading a book called The Feelings Monster, where they're going to look at some of these feelings in the center, and then they're going to make their own emotion wheel today, and they're going to bring it home for you guys, and it's going to have a magnet on the back so that you can put it on the refrigerator. And maybe if they're having a rough day, you can say, hey, what are we feeling right now? And give them some opportunity to articulate some language so that you can have some better conversation around that. This is what we're going to be doing over the next 4 weeks, is kind of looking at this from a theological lens, because here's what I believe so strongly. I believe that when we talk about some of these scriptures that shape us as Jesus followers, right? When we talk about Matthew 25 and to take care of the least of these and to feed the hungry and clothe the naked and take care of the sick, and we talk about being compassionate and we talk about caring for one another's burdens, we also have a responsibility in the church to talk about things like compassion fatigue and boundaries and the importance of not burning yourself out so that you start to become resentful. How do we answer that call in a way that is healthy and sustaining? We do it as a community. You're not expected to do everything all by yourself. Sometimes you need to rest because we're human and we're wired to need to rest. And that's why we can say, okay, today's my day that I'm going to take off, and I know that you've got this today, and you're going to carry this today, and you're going to be the hands and feet in this moment today. And there's something really beautiful about that. We see that throughout the ministry of Jesus. We see that in the ministry of Elijah when he is sleeping, and God wakes him up and says, here's a snack, and why don't you go back to sleep and take another nap? Like, there's something holy about that, and we don't always talk about that in faith spaces like I think we need to. I think we also have to understand that we've got to do some reframing around our language of what is good and what is bad and what is holy and what was designed. And we also need to understand that community and being a wide, welcoming community means that we are inclusive, we are compassionate, we are informed, and we're accessible. And that means we've got to unlearn and relearn some different things around mental health. So I want to share a few things with you to think about with me. Number one is this. If you are struggling with anxiety or anger or frustration at circumstances in your life or in the world, you're not alone. I would argue that probably most of us in this room are struggling with some of those things right now. And I would argue that you would be surprised how much more we have in common when we're willing to talk about those things and share those as connection points with each other. Here's something else that I want us to think about. Our mental health is never a source of guilt or shame. It is something to be celebrated. It is something to draw us together. Even when it's a struggle and it's hard, it brings us into support spaces with other people who experience it as hard. Your mental health, no matter what it looks like, does not make you bad, it does not make you broken, and it does not make you a burden to other people or to the divine. And if you have ever been made to feel any other way, I say that to you in this room, and I say that to those that are watching online. If you have ever been made to feel that way in a sacred space, I am sorry. Because I don't think it's a genuine reflection of the heart of God. I think that when we look at Scripture, God welcomes us with open arms and welcomes our struggles and welcomes the things about us that are difficult and hard, and never once is there condemnation in that moment. Never once does that exclude us from community or from connection. Hear me on this too, and we're going to talk more about this next week. Your mental health matters no matter what your gender is. There is a lot of data that is showing us that men struggle more silently with mental health and actually end up longer in life having higher outcomes of suicide and depression and self-harm because they were raised to not talk about it. Because they were raised in a culture of toxic masculinity that said, guys don't feel things. We just keep going. We just keep doing. I am so grateful to have a husband who feels things deeply. And one of the things that I think was really beautiful, and I didn't tell him I was going to do this, so he'll get mad at me later, but he got a text message this week from our oldest son. And it made Bob tear up. It made me tear up. But he texted and he said, I just want you to know, I'm so grateful for your example that it was okay to grow up with my emotions. That it's okay to feel deeply as a guy. And there's something really powerful about having that kind of an example in your life if you're a young adult male. And if you don't have it, I want you to look around you, because being part of a community means we can look at other examples of that. Nobody, no matter what the stereotype is, nobody is supposed to be tough and get through it all by yourself and never feel it. We are all designed to feel. We are all designed for those feelings to connect us to one another. Here's something else that I want to say from this space. Therapy is a good thing. I have a coffee cup that says, I love Jesus and I have a great therapist. A lot of times in the church, going to therapy is seen as a sign of weakness. Or instead of going to a licensed mental health professional, we think we need to go to the church and get the advice of the pastor. Hear me, I will have coffee with you all day long. I mean, it's coffee. I will sit and I will listen and I will hold space with you and I will, absorb the emotions and process the emotions with you, but I am not a licensed mental health professional and I cannot replace one. We need people that are trained and qualified to help us understand the complexity of how we are wired. And there is absolutely nothing wrong or shameful with reaching out for mental health help. Just like there is nothing wrong or shameful about going to the doctor when we have high blood pressure or an ache or a bruise. And we have to normalize that in faith spaces. We're going to talk more about this next week, but I can tell you from research and from data that many, many times when people are asked what took them so long to connect for help and reach out for help, a lot of the things that are named are rooted in religion. And that's something that we as faith communities have to change the conversation around. Here's the other thing that I have to say, and that is I know that we are struggling in our own ways because we all struggle differently. I know that things feel hard right now in our world. I know that the headlines are hard. I know that for some of you, you are members of vulnerable communities or you have loved ones that are members of vulnerable communities who you worry about. And there is a lot of fear and there's a lot of anxiety right now, and mental health as a whole in our country right now, we've been watching the numbers consistently increase where people are expressing the need for support and help, where the calls to mental health hotlines for all ages and different vulnerabilities are increasing consistently. So hear me say this. If you are struggling, don't give up. Don't give up. You are not alone. And this world needs you in it. You are uniquely wired to make a difference that only you can make, to leave a footprint and a fingerprint and an impact on this world and on people in this world that cannot be replaced by anyone else. Your sense of humor, your gifts, your talents, your experiences, your storytelling, your leadership, the things that you are passionate about, that's what makes you you. And you matter, and you are important, and this world, this community, this faith community needs you in it. And you don't have to be okay all the time. You're not alone. And you can reach out to somebody and say, I'm not okay. And I just need somebody to know that I'm not okay. There is no pretty bow today. There is no place to end that doesn't leave us with some degree of tension, because this is a start of a long conversation. It's a big deal for us here at Englewood to commit to 5 weeks around this conversation, because we are lucky if some faith communities will take 1. But we're going to dig into this deeply because it's important and because it matters and because, like I said before, I believe it is deeply, deeply, deeply theological. I want you to know for today that you are not abnormal, there's nothing wrong with you, that you are loved, that you are seen, that you are welcome, and that you are supported. There's a hymn in our hymnals that we're going to sing. And it's a beautiful hymn, and it's a beautiful invitation. And so before we start this, I just want you to kind of think of this. Again, I say this to those who have maybe experienced language that was dismissive or manipulative in some way around mental health or grief or anger or frustrations. I want you to hear the divine whispering to you, this invitation that says, if you're feeling those things, if you're exhausted from the emotional and mental load that you are carrying right now, from the feelings that you've been trying to haul around with you everywhere you're going, if you're tired and your soul is tired, come to me. Come to me. I welcome those big feelings. I was having a conversation this week with somebody, and we were talking about that mistruth, that so dangerous lie that gets told in the church over and over again. God is never going to give you more than you can handle. I hate it. It's not scriptural. It's not in the Bible. But we treat it like it's holy. The truth of the matter is you can never give God more than God can handle. And so God says to us, the divine whispers to us, come to me, O weary traveler. Come to me with everything that you're carrying. Come to me with all the list of anxieties and fears and worries and concerns. It's not too much, and I welcome them here. So I invite you to stay seated for this today and just use this. If you want to join, the lyrics are going to be on the screen, but I also just invite you, if you want to let this hymn just kind of wash over you as a word of invitation from the divine, to come, to not be alone, to reframe the way that you've seen those things, and to know that you are loved, you are seen, and you're not alone.